Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you for another episode of the Sales Community's Tech Sales Inside live stream. I'm joined by my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you. We've got a fantastic guest today. Tell us a little about Jennifer.
Oh, yes, we do. Jennifer is fantastic. She is definitely a up-and-comer. I didn't ask this beforehand, Jennifer, but I assume it's okay to say that you have some great opportunities that you're looking at job-wise, right? So I would definitely hire if I had something, and we are trying to aggressively through my recruiting business, Top Talent Recruiting. But anyway, Jennifer, great to have you.
Thank you.
So Jennifer, let me ask you again, to build on our podcast interview this morning, for those that may not know a little about you, give us a glimpse into kind of where you've been and what you've done so far.
Sure. So I have a 2-decade background in mostly Fortune 50 and Fortune 100 companies, but also startups. So I have a solid background in sales leadership, sales management, but then also in building out a channel. Basically all different directions of revenue generation. And then I have also been an EVP of sales and marketing and CRO, running end-to-end revenue and P&L for a startup focused on SaaS and digital health. So
that's a fantastic background. And for our audience, if you haven't had a chance, salescommunity.com/podcast is our episode this morning. Highly encourage you to go back and listen to that. We talked a lot about kind of the key trends, and we want to build on that. I would also encourage you in the various channels that we're broadcasting this, jump in with questions for Jennifer, Randy. If I can share any insights as well, I'm happy to do it. But Jen, let's talk about the key trends. Let's start with the key trends you're seeing in this pandemic, through this pandemic, that now that we're getting vaccines, now that, I traveled last week, I think Randy's traveled, as we start to kind of get back into, if there is such thing as business as usual, what are some of the trends you believe are going to stay in the tech sales leadership community?
yes, good question. So I think that in technology, we've always been a little bit ahead of the curve. So we have had webinars going for the past 15 years and have gotten used to doing business that way. So I think that we were kind of ahead of the curve when it came to readjusting during the pandemic. So I think that that's going to continue. And I think that there's going to be more of a balance where, people might not be going into an office on a regular basis. There might be a shrinkage when it comes to, office space, and folks ending up, utilizing office space more for community, get-togethers, conference rooms, large events instead of day-to-day. We're seeing that, and we're seeing folks kind of move their headquarters around, shrink their headquarters, and going to, more of a disconnected, united online kind of community. So I see that happening. I also see that we will probably be truncating our travel. We've realized that there's a lot of things that we can do online. Not only is it a cost saver, it's a huge time saver as well. So I see that being a blend moving into the future as well, that we will do some in person, but utilizing technology more heavily in the future.
Seidl, I'm going to go to you a second. I love how you prioritize quality time with your family. And during this pandemic, you were able to go out west and spend some time doing what you love, which is the skiing. And then I think you're down in Florida, and you even spend some time on the weekends with your son's baseball team. Do you believe this notion of working from anywhere is going to continue? And how does that impact the tech sales community?
Yeah, I think it depends. I was talking to a friend, Jim Lampert, who's a sales executive at OpsRamp last week, and he's probably one of the few who's actually done a great job getting out there on the road. And I think he would say that he's been able to take advantage, because there are people that still do want to go out, that are still starved, no pun intended, going out for lunches or dinners. So I think in this climate, you can still take advantage of it. But yeah, for sure, everything's changing. I mean, for me personally, in the past, I would have felt, guilty not offering to meet somebody face to face, but now with Zoom, if you do want to focus on the life balance side of things, I'd argue you can be a lot more productive. And as you said, I've been able to do, all that I do from, really any location. So, personally, it's been an unfortunate situation, but I think, professionally has allowed all of us to really kind of up our game in terms of really being as productive as we can.
So, Jennifer, we talked about you got your start at, interestingly enough, GE Health and GE Healthcare. Talk about some of those early experiences that really shaped your subsequent success at Cisco and HPE and Oracle. So talk about that foundation. Where did that come from?
Yes. So GE was really known for a very good but very tough corporate sales culture. Kind of the Jack Welch school of sales, which was very cutthroat. It was a very good avenue to learn from. I had a sales position before that was more SMB and focused on 70 calls a day, 10 new appointments a week, 5 follow-ons. So I really had that kind of pedigree. I cut my teeth really well in that, tactical sales. GE really helped me get into enterprise sales and really, really do it well. So process, repeatable process, predictable, accountable was really what I was able to hone and learn there. And I was able to be the top of the country in terms of large sales equipment sold because I was able to utilize our leasing arm, GE Money, and I was able to use that so well. They started to have me train other sales reps on how to utilize those tools. And with a company like GE, there was a lot of things that a lot of opportunities to kind of co-brand and bring things in together, and I was able to unlock those very well. So it was a good experience.
I love that. Again, Randy, you see a lot of different sales candidates, sales managers, sales leaders. What are you looking for in those foundational early years? Is it the brand of the company? Is it set of skills and what they were doing? And is there a predictor of their future success based on those early years?
That's a lot of questions, and I know you try and coach me to give shorter answers, so I'll try to do my best. So I'd say the brand of the companies, not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I could argue some, company that has a, bad brand and maybe failed. If somebody was able to do halfway decent in that environment, I might rather take that person over somebody who's at some, fantastic, blue chip, big unicorn company who, what was above average, because they certainly would have to, kind of work a lot harder. I think within COVID times, those that have relationships are certainly, of huge value. It's certainly much harder these days to try and start net new relationships. So that's something that helps. And then at the end of the day, I could, again, go on probably 20 different things, but I think it's just that raw, kind of energy, excitement, energy. And all that kind of gets bundled up into a brand of somebody. So as you're looking to hire them or recruit them, just doing, old-fashioned, reference checking from a diverse group really allows you to kind of get the firsthand story. And I'd argue that's, if there's one thing to do, it would be that kind of diverse reference checking. Really, I think tells a true story about any folks.
Jennifer, you've built teams, you've hired some great folks. Let me ask you the same question. Are there some attributes in their formative years you're looking for that's a strong predictor of their success in enterprise selling?
So yes, I get an idea of, kind of the overall feel. Will they fit in with the team? Are they going to be easy to work with? Are they going to be hardworking? Are they ethical? Do they have integrity? Those are all things that I'm really looking for. But for the startup companies that I've worked for, the big thing for me was they're going to have a large territory. They might not have all the tools completely packaged up with a bow that they want. So do they have grit? Are they able to kind of get in there and really figure things out if everything's not perfect? Can they create an asset if there isn't one? How do they profile a larger territory, for example? And what I mean by that is if you have a quarter of the country, how do you figure out what the low-hanging fruit is? How do you do your research? how do you, what tools do you need to be successful? And how do you determine what are the top 20 accounts that you're going to be going after based on, what you know about the company? So that predictable, repeatable process that allows you to be accountable and not have those really high and lows that sometimes people get used to. We want predictable, accountable results. And those are the folks that I feel like can really get there. And if they have a Rolodex of customers that they can also dip into, that's the icing on the cake. But if they don't have the fundamentals, that person's probably not going to be successful in the long term.
Again, for our audience, I encourage you to jump in with questions of either Jennifer or Randy. Jennifer, you went GE Healthcare, then you went to Cisco and built a channel and really had a chance to work with partners. Talk about the role of the channel partnerships and channel relationships moving forward in the post-pandemic. Where's the right fit? What should be the right mix? Just kind of comment on the channel side of the business.
Sure. So I had about half my career in, direct sales and revenue generation. And then I really wanted to see what it would look like to build out a channel and how to do that with an indirect sales team and really get that scale that you can't get sometimes with a sales team. So Cisco does that the best that I've ever seen worldwide. So I wanted to work with Cisco to really understand how to do that well. So I think the first thing when building out a channel is to keep your expectations realistic. A lot of people feel like when they build out a channel that there's just going to be this pipeline of done deals that are completely closed and they're just going to wake up and they'll be in their inbox every morning. And that is not a realistic expectation. It's really figuring out what are the key things that you can bring in with the channel partner to be an adjunct to your sales team, help scale your sales team and fill in gaps that you have. For example, if you don't have a big BDR team, you might want to hook up with a company that has 200 sales reps ready to hit the phones. You work with them to make sure that they're trained. You might want to put a body in the office with them to help train them and get them going to be your pipeline generators. There's other ones that have relationships that they can walk you into that might be a very quick, some very quick sales for you and relationships, but they're not into the whole sales process. So it's setting what you need, where your gaps are, and then getting the right partners to work with to fill those gaps.
Randy, let me ask you to build on that. What do you believe is the right opportunity, the right role for the channels moving forward? We've had Frank Roush, we've had other, channel partners as guests in the past. Moving forward, what do you believe is the real opportunity to leverage the channel?
I think it's huge. So whether you're a big or small company, it's I call it a variable cost model. So if they don't produce, you don't have to pay. If they produce, you pay, which, from a P&L perspective, usually works out pretty well. And at the end of the day, you just have extra feet on the street. So as you look at the pyramid of accounts from the, largest globals down to the, SMBs, all companies need help being, kind of selling to, whatever that portfolio. And a lot of times there's just, so many things to sell that, a lot of individual companies have that trusted advisor of these partners to really help them, understand kind of what's where, help make this vendor selections. Because if you're an individual company, sometimes it's hard to really go and understand all that versus somebody that is going to be with you, has been with you, and will be with you going forward.
Sounds
I agree
great.
with Randy. It's a huge force multiplier, and it's something that if you have the ability to do the proper care and feeding of a channel, because it's not a super light lift. You really have to invest in training and relationships and things like that. And if you are mature enough as a corporation to do that, it can be a huge force multiplier that you can't get with your own sales force. You'd never be able to get to the scale that you would need that the channel couldn't fill.
Let me ask you a follow-up question with that, and then I want to we have a question from Tucker. Jennifer, do you believe enough tech companies are doing that feeding and care of their channels?
I think there's some that do it well. I think there are others that the mentality is that they work for us And that is a dangerous game, right? Because they are building a healthy business. And I always saw it that it was my job to help them build that healthy business, to get the right resources, to make sure that they were positioned in the right way to succeed. If you have a sales team that feels like that the channel works for them, that sometimes can be a rub. So it's respect both ways, and it can be hugely beneficial.
In my experience, the channel guys have the relationships on the ground with the customers and with the buyers, and they're much closer than you may be. So you're also missing out on that. So Randy, we've got a question from Tucker.
Yes, Tucker. All right. How can sellers best partner with marketing when taking on new large territories?
Yes, good question. So I would say that, selling and sales and marketing go together. They have to dovetail. So say, marketing is one major piece of the pie, and starts out marketing qualified leads. We call them MQLs, and turns those over into sales qualified leads, SQLs, right? So they are looking for, we're looking for brand awareness from marketing, thought leadership, so that when you go into a new customer, hopefully the response isn't, okay, who are you and what do you do? So that there's brand awareness in the community. But then also to start doing those drip campaigns, the webinars, the outreaches, the one-to-manys, typically takes 12 hits for someone to get interested in actually talking to a salesperson. So that kind of keeping people warm, kind of determining what's the low-hanging fruit, people that are looking at that period of time for what you are offering. So it's kind of meets together right in the middle at kind of an SDR role or at a sales rep level. So it's that early pipeline development, but then also that brand and thought leadership. So marketing is extremely, extremely important when it comes to setting sales up for success.
Seidl, you also have a pretty passionate lens on sales and marketing. Talk about their collaboration and really getting more done with fewer cycles.
Absolutely. And just to go back to that territory question, I think a lot of it is really finding out kind of what is the sweet spot and what are the right use cases. I've got a client, data robot, is artificial intelligence space, talking to a rep yesterday in Chicago. So they're going after companies that are kind of in the distribution business. And, there's other companies that have done business that they've got some great use cases from. And the trick is, okay, how do you make sure that that's kind of easy and consumable? So it's not a horizontal technology play, but you can kind of spin that horizontal value prop into something that's specific for that customer, for that company, for that industry. And I always say at the end of the day, it's if you're in an elevator with the CFO, what are you going to do? And it's not 50 slides of whatever, PowerPoint or techno mumbo jumbo. It's how you're going to help them save money, make money, or stay out of jail in the case of compliance. And then to your question around just, kind of sales and marketing, I think they have to be, aligned. There's probably the kind of chief, revenue and marketing officer role, I think over time will probably, evolve, where there's a big, revenue ops component, there's a big sales component, there's a big marketing component, but, making sure that, any money that's being spent, in particular on the marketing side, that there's, ROI metrics that come back that somebody on the sales side can say, hey, we're getting real value for this.
So yesterday, as we all know, was the International Women's Day. Jennifer, you and I talked about this. Jesse, Randy has an interesting question about more gender diversity in tech sales.
Great question. Hi, Jennifer. Love the podcast. How do we get more diversity in sales? Predominantly sales and tech sales are mostly male. Some of my best leaders have been women. What's your perspective on this? I'm sure in violent agreement, but definitely would love some calls to action or ideas as well, obviously.
Yeah, so love keeping this front and center. I have always been, typically the only saleswoman on a sales team. And I would love to see more women get into sales. I think that it's something extremely beneficial for women to do for their careers. And women are really, really good at it. We're natural relationship builders. So that's important. We also are very good with details, which is really important for sales as well. We're good listeners. So sales is a great career for women. I think supporting women early is really important, making sure that we've got more women in leadership all the way up from, frontline managers and first line managers to second and third, and making sure that we are keeping diversity in mind, because it's very difficult to recruit women when you have, 3 layers of all men at every single layer of leadership. And if women don't see that there are people that look like them, it can be very intimidating to even get started. So it's important as you're building out sales teams, the biggest advice that I would give is make sure that you're pushing for a diverse candidate pool. As a revenue leader, it's important to have the right fit for the right seat, right? And I always have to have the best fit. But as a leader, I also want to make sure that I'm pushing HR and pushing our recruiters to have a diversified candidate pool, so that there are opportunities for the best fit to be a diversified, candidate base.
Randy, are you seeing enough diversified candidate base? Are you seeing enough pool of women and ethnic kind of minorities in sales and early and on up opportunities?
Yeah, no. It's tough. We're trying to help. We're trying to support. In any way we can. Interesting side story. Last week, I had the pleasure of talking to Megan Robbins, who's at Florida State University, and I was pretty much unaware, but they've got a phenomenal. I guess there's probably around 10 or so universities that actually have great sales programs. So I think you've got you're trying to kind of nurture and cultivate kind of what's a fixed base right now. So there's it's a minority population, right? So if you say, okay, how can you turn a minority to a majority, or, at least kind of half and half? I think it's going back sooner into the college ranks and saying, look, here is this great job. Here's this great profession. Here's something that you can do. And I was beyond, Megan and, some of her friends, kind of what they do and what they know now is insane compared to, what we knew as nothing, coming out. So I'd argue it's kind of going back into the college ranks and really, kind of pushing on it that way. That will help you yield success. And if Megan Robbins is any indication, I think the future is very bright.
I also I think one or both of you said we all need to do more. We all can do more. An executive asked me if I would just talk to his daughter who's graduating. By the way, she's graduating a marketing and data analytics degree. Sales is not even on her radar. And just in every conversation, just her DNA, her, all the ingredients say this woman, this young lady would really benefit from and succeed in that if she had the right opportunity. So I've planted a seed. Listen, it might not be frontline sales. It could be business development. It could be a channel role. But don't discount that. And I think it's a great opportunity to bring very different lenses, very different perspectives to this. Talking about that, Randy, Lauren Smith has an SDR has a question about maybe potentially changing jobs.
Oh, all right. I'm struggling with being an SDR for 3 years. I just can't seem to get promoted and pass this hurdle. I've changed jobs once and might want to do it again. How should I think about this? I guess, some quick thoughts that I have are, it's always good to talk to, management when you're hired, number one, and, especially once you've been there, to say, if these are career aspirations that you have, how can you get set up for management? A lot of companies just have SDRs and they're going to be, SDRs forever. That's obviously, I think, the wrong thing. As an example, we called them telemarketers at the time, but equates to SDR today. I was at an EMC, and you knew, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to do that. You're going to sell, and then kind of management and everything else. So I think it's just making sure that you have kind of open communication with the leadership where you're at. And I think the great thing about today is, people can change jobs every year. And, that's not frowned upon. In my day, if I go back, 80s and 90s, if you change jobs, once every 3 or 5 years, something was wrong with you. So I think there's just, unlimited opportunity. And I'd kind of say, try and buy, go somewhere, try, see, people are going to say one thing, may or may not work out. If it doesn't work out, totally fine. Take those experiences somewhere else. And Jennifer, I'm sure, has some other thoughts.
Yeah, Jennifer, build on that. So what should Lauren think about? How would she approach kind of either getting more awareness in her current company or looking for another opportunity that will help her move up?
Right. Well, I completely agree with what Randy said as well. The SDR role is a great great foundation for a sales rep in the future. And if you have had 3 years of success, my first question is, how's your success been? Have you been making your numbers? Have you been making your quotas? That's very important. Folks that are not successful in a current role, it's very difficult to move up to that next level if you haven't mastered the level that you're at. And that is really important because as a sales rep or a sales executive, it's really important to be able to get your foot in the door and set those meetings. I have never had a role where I had an SDR that was just feeding me leads. It was always all on me. And I look for that when I'm hiring salespeople to make sure that not only can they close a deal, but they can build their pipeline in the very beginning. And that means setting up those meetings. So I'd say it's a great training ground for a full-on sales role. And if you've had the success, you have the right to earn, right to ask for that, and you have earned that. So I'm also happy to talk to you if you want to reach out after the podcast.
That sounds great. So Jennifer, you went again from GE Healthcare to Cisco to HPE to Oracle to a startup. Talk about that transition from large, recognizable brand. I mean, you don't have to say Cisco who, right? And everybody's heard of Oracle, but you may go to a startup where people haven't heard of it and you don't have that awareness and that brand. Talk about that transition, and specifically, what were some of the challenges? What were some of the upsides for you?
Absolutely. So I've really curated my career in a specific way, and I knew exactly what I wanted to gain out of joining a startup. So, going from a large company to a startup, one, the hours are a lot longer. I doubled my hours, and in a typical day, it's a lot more exciting. You wear a lot of hats. Nothing's predictable. There's a lot of changes that happen on a day-to-day basis. So you have to be very comfortable with kind of that, the unknown and, quick changes, and be able to nimbly pivot and kind of that, the changes, right, in a day-to-day. So those are the big things. And then also the resources. You might not have the resources that you have at a large company, although at some of the large companies that I was at, sometimes there's so resources that you can't find the resources that you need, and you end up having to build things anyway. So it was just an interesting transition. I'd say what I was trying to get out of it, and what I did get out of it, is I wanted to run my own P&L, and I wanted to run revenue end to end. It's not something that you typically get even at like an SVP level at a large company. And it was something that I wanted to build into my skill set and kind of that cross-functional expertise. So I had heavy experience with the engineering team, with the product team, with folks in different kinds of background roles, and that was really an opportunity for me to be one of the key executives within the organization, starting things out, building vision, and moving it forward, and creating that new corporate culture, which is so important. So it was a great experience.
Love that. Randy, I just shared with our audience as well. I love that statement that I curated my career in a very kind of specific way. Are you seeing leaders be intentional about their brand and about really thinking about what's next in gaining more P&L experience, creating a bigger impact in the organizations they join? Seidl, talk about that journey for leaders for a second.
Sure. Knowing Jennifer, I mean, she is all over it, to say the least. But I think, seeking mentoring help. She's always every quarter checking in with me, asking questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And I'd say, I'll make a broad statement. Probably, half are deliberate, half are not deliberate. I think, and it's probably more than half really are not deliberate. You just kind of go, and here's where I'm at. Here's what's going on. Okay, what's the next thing? So certainly trying to have something of a plan is a good thing to do if you can. And then I'll just kind of follow up with a question for Jennifer that I'm sure she gets asked. Curious how you answer it. But if you look at the judge your book by the cover, it's like, oh, she's a big company person. Not really a small company. Why should we take a chance on her coming in here? She's only done the big company and she did a small company for a little bit. So kind of how do you answer that if it's a startup or earlier stage company that says, oh, you can't do well here. You're only a big company person. What would you say?
Well, I would say that I really like to get my hands dirty. I am a true operator, and I always have been. And I have a really strong entrepreneurial bent. So I like to say that I have a big company pedigree with entrepreneurial grit and a well-rounded business acumen. That's kind of my statement. The way that I kind of curated that, I started my own business when I was 13 now. Was it super lucrative? No, but I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial mindset. There were, when I was at GE, I joined a startup within GE. It had been an acquisition and it was kind of outside of the mothership. So I got the opportunity to really hone that skill set there, create a lot of marketing things that had not been created, right? If I needed a one pager, sometimes I'd have to create things. I'd have to create all of these things that didn't exist. So that was a really good opportunity to know that my checks were going to clear and that I was going to be paid, but have the opportunity to really build out some of those things myself. And that entrepreneurial mindset has really been able to support me very well in large companies as well. But I found that sometimes in large companies, my pace, I kind of outpace, what's going on with the rest of the company. So startups, particularly growth-oriented startups, are really a sweet spot for me. I know what great looks like. I also know how to roll up my sleeves and create that, and either build these teams from scratch, build out a full executive team, but then also scale a team and make sure that it's functioning properly as well.
So Randy, great answer, Jen. Randy, we've got a little bit of a challenging question from Chad about PIP.
Okay, Chad, I'm possibly at risk to get fired. My manager has put me on a PIP. For those who don't know, performance improvement plan. It looks like a reasonable goal, but I'm nervous about getting fired. I was actually in a Clubhouse chat on beginner sales, and they're talking about performance plans and performance plans and all that. So I get a couple perspectives on this. One is, nothing should ever be a surprise. So there should be ongoing discussions, whether it's an individual to their manager, individual with their peers that they're working with. In the case of kind of maybe SEs or pre-sales type folks, or if you have people working for you. So nothing should be a surprise. It should always be. I used to always say, hey, can I give you some feedback? Or if I'd go on a sales call with the rep, I'd say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? They're usually shocked and say, oh my gosh, I never had somebody in management actually ask me for feedback. And they may or may not say it. If they do, it's fantastic. And then I'd take that opportunity to say, hey, can I give you some feedback? So, first of all, none of this should be a surprise, which almost all the time it is. And then as the follow-up to the question really around, what are the metrics? Are the metrics fair? And usually it's based off of, objective numbers. And then also I would say behaviors. And too often people are focused on just the numbers. So as an extreme example, I'd rather take somebody who's short of goal, but is doing all the right behaviors in terms of sales calls and proposals and work ethic and product knowledge and value propositions, et cetera, and say if that person has the right behaviors, is not performing numbers wise, versus somebody else who maybe is crushing it, but they just happen to get lucky on a Bluebird deal. So Jennifer, have you ever put anybody in a PIP, and what did you do with them?
I've repositioned people.
Is that a polite way to reposition them?
Well, I think that it goes both ways, right? People have to have the right skill set for the right role so that they're positioned to succeed. And there are certain people that I think can be coached and mentored into being very successful if they are not currently. But then there's others that the gap is just a little bit too big. And I don't think it's fair if you have somebody that either has been shifted into a role. I've seen this happen a lot, where they were hired for one role and then they're needed somewhere else, especially in a startup. This happens all the time. And sometimes they're positioned into a situation where they were pulled into a sales role and they're not a salesperson and they hate it. right? So there's a lot of communication back and forth into, what does that person want to do in their career? What are they enjoying? What do they feel that they need to work on? And then I also communicate that back and forth, and we figure out, all right, what's the next step for this person, right? It might be this role, it might be something else, right? That, and it might be within the company, it might be outside of the company. I've definitely bent over backwards for people that I felt were great, that were not a good fit for the company. And I introduced them to other folks where they were an absolutely good fit. So I would say to this question, when something is documented and things are obviously going down a not great course, typically that is not super correctable. And it might be best to, use that as an opportunity to start looking and, build a network and look somewhere else. I have seen people come back from that. But it's really a very personal decision, as well as whether you're going to be really, truly supported by your manager.
So, Randy, we've got a comment and a question from Adam about being new in the role.
All right, Adam, thank you. Hi, Jennifer. I am new to the industry, recently transitioning from financial services. I want to know what advice you have for someone starting out as a BDR with not much experience winning business and building relationships. What's the best way to get organized and not fall into a rabbit hole that people in my position tend to fall into when trying to ramp up?
That's a long question, Adam. I think it's a good one, though. So, being a BDR, I applaud you because being a BDR is one of the most difficult roles that I could conjure up. When I was first starting out, I can tell you that I was doing basically a full enterprise sales role, but you have to get a very tough skin, realizing that as a BDR, you are the tip of the spear, right? So you have to learn how to be comfortable with no, and that's typically a precursor to yes. So, toughen up, make sure that, you are fine-tuning and honing your delivery of your pitch, that you get comfortable, that you add your own spin. And it's just about, kind of fine-tuning, your personal perspective and delivery. So don't lose heart. It's difficult in the beginning. It's all part of the process, learning your pitch, learning your and figuring out what works. So keep at it, and then also keep track of, what's working and what's not working, and some A/B testing so that you can figure out, this is really working positive. Talk to the people around you and figure out if there are things with people that have been there a long time that have been really successful that they can share with you. Your peers are going to be your best bet at figuring out what works specifically in your role.
Jennifer, a comment you made in our podcast interview this morning really resonated with me, which I wrote down. You said, clarity is kindness. Talk about that a second.
Yeah, so that is something that I have really weaved into my kind of leadership persona. I think that it's really important, and it goes back to, what you and Randy were saying earlier, that, this should never, if someone's put on a PIP or is having a problem with, meeting expectations, it should never be a surprise. So that's what I mean about clarity is kindness. Make sure that goals are consistent, that they are communicated well, swim lanes are communicated well, so that people don't get frustrated working on things either that they're not going to get confident for, or that they're supposed to. I've seen some leaderships kind of set up issues and challenges between people and kind of almost like infighting. I prefer not to set those kinds of things up because it's counterproductive for me. I want all of my teams to be working together. I want the engineering team and the sales engineers working with the sales team, the outside sales team and the channel and the inside sales folks, and everybody kind of passing leads to each other. And so I want to foster we're all in the same boat. Heavy accountability, but the opportunity to really all row in the same direction. And then I would also add to that never lose alone. You can win alone, but you better be winning. Like if you've got something that's going sideways, pull in your resources. That is something that is so important. Never lose alone. If something's going sideways, pull in a resource, pull in a manager, pull in a leader, pull in somebody with a cross-functional skill set or somebody in the partner community that has a relationship there. Never lose alone. So those are a couple of things that I like to bring in.
So Rand, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, just for Adam, I'll give you 2 words. I agree with everything that Jennifer said to Adam's question, but I'd say sales calls. So do everything that she said for sure, but it's repetitions, right? So if you're Brady, okay, it's throwing the passes. If you're whatever sports analogy you want to do, hitting golf balls, hitting tennis balls, but it's repetitions. When we were doing it, we kind of call sheets. Now it's things are a lot fancier, but kind of the more at bats you take, the more chance you got of getting hits and getting deals. And it's really numbers game early on, and be reflective, like she said, around kind of how can you improve what went well, what are other people's doing. But as long as you have the volume, you're going to do great.
For our audience, I live in Atlanta, and just so you know, Randy Seidl brings up Brady as often as he gets a chance, right? He knows that cut is deep, and he just brings up Brady examples often, right? So,
well, he probably, when he went from Boston down to Tampa, he probably flew over. He probably did it. That would be hysterical, right?
He
did. Even to Atlanta.
Now he's in our division and conference, and we play him twice a year. Like once a year for Super Bowl wasn't bad enough.
Yeah.
All right.
But at least you have Boston College quarterback in Matt Ryan. So
well, maybe he'll show up one of these days. All right. Moving on to a question from Hunter. Randy, let me start with you on this one. With Hunter's question.
Yep. With a digital world causing many to switch jobs more often, how can companies retain employees longer? Great question. So I think it's really, if I go back to kind of what I talked about with the, kind of talking about the PIP, it's not about putting people on PIPs, but it's really just kind of having that ongoing discussion and what is it that people can do different and better to improve. I've gone into many sales cultures where they say, oh, the A players, you don't coach, it's, work on the B's and C's. And I'd say, well, you got to work on B's and C's, but you can get a huge uplift from those A players. And if you take, Jennifer probably is a great example. She's a sponge, very, very coachable. So I think a lot of people really just kind of want to have the feedback. They want to know what is it that they agree they can work on with their manager to improve professionally. And then I think on the personal side, there's always going to be work conflicts. I would always be, fairly hard charging with my team. But I say, if there's something that's personal or family, no problem. Just go do that. We'll figure it out, whether it's, big company or small company. And ultimately, I think it's just kind of treating people how you want to be treated. So if you can have a culture where you're doing it, it's great. And obviously you have to have on the sales side, you have to have a, good product, good territory, good solution, fair goal, ability to make money, kind of all that I'd call as table stakes.
Jennifer, build on that. How have you retained great talent, young talent like Hunter and others that jumped in, Adam and Laura and company? How have you retained great talent with your teams?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, treating people with respect. I do something when I'm, when I have new people on my team or I'm coming in as a new leader, I do something called acquiring the team. So I go in and I meet them. I talk about, where they are now, where they want to be, a little bit about their background and kind of figure out, what are their goals? And then I sit down and I think about how can I kind of foster, them getting to the next level in their career. And it might not be tomorrow. It might be, 12 months from now or 18 months from now. But I like to think about, things. If somebody is looking at being a leader or a manager, are there opportunities for them to lead projects, for example, and present to the rest of the group? Or can I help them create a platform when we're doing our all hands calls for them to speak for 5 minutes and address the rest of the company so that they can start getting comfortable with that and building their skill set? I think that's important. And creating a culture of trust. I am not an easy manager, but I think I'm a kind and a fair manager. So and leader. So I end up holding people accountable, but I also, feel like it's also my responsibility to make sure that people understand, that clarity is kindness, what's expected of them, where they need to exceed, what hoops they need to jump through. And then if everybody's doing the right thing, making sure that we're working smarter and not harder, right? So that people aren't burning out, so that, to Randy's point, if there are things going on in somebody's personal life, I don't need to know the ins and outs, but if someone's struggling, I want to be there, to support. And I consider myself a servant leader. So the other thing that I like to do is making sure that I am eliminating barriers for folks. So if there's a blocker or something that I can remove, so I'm here to coach, support, provide clarity, provide mentorship, and remove barriers. So I think that the corporate culture is also really important. Just that respect for people.
Randy, you and I both have young daughters, and millennials in some ways get a bad rap of they want to become CEO tomorrow. How do you balance that unbridled enthusiasm and don't squash their aspirations and desires to do more and really create a greater impact with the fundamental need that I think the three of us have understood that, it takes years to build the wisdom and build the experiences and go through some ups and downs. And how do you balance those two? How do you make sure you don't crush their aspirations, but also instill in them the need to kind of build that experience, build those paths?
Yeah. So I think it's great having the long-term goal. So if a long-term goal is a CEO, that's made up of several kind of dominoes or steps. So just focus on kind of what's the next thing. So if you're a, SDR and you want to become an outside rep or more of a, selling role instead of a lead generation role, say, okay, what are the skill sets that I need to have? What do I need to do? How can I get there? So it's kind of like, you're not going to, just go to third base, right? Okay, you got to go to first, you got to go second, third, home. So it's kind of what are those, kind of baby steps along the way, and comes back to our theme on the, kind of performance management aspect of stuff, but kind of what are those things that the person can improve in, develop in, have it in writing, and okay, now, hey, I did this, and anything else. And, how do you just keep going with that type of attitude and behavior?
Kind of stair step. Got it. So let's talk about, Tanya's got a great question for Jennifer.
Tanya, do you have any tips for personal brand on social media? I noticed you are very well positioned on LinkedIn and would love any tips.
So thank you for the compliment, Tanya. I appreciate that. Yes, I do. So, it's important to be active, but then also to kind of curate the right brand, right? So I always look at, when I'm creating content or when I'm, engaging, I want to make sure that I'm engaging in the right way with the right folks. So when I create an article, for example, I'm a revenue generator and I'm building that cross-functional skill set. So I might put together a blog on a certain topic with the opportunity to be seen in a certain in a certain light, in a certain audience. I think it's also very important to have a professional picture. That is something that, I went and hired someone and I went into a studio and had a professional picture taken. I'm always shocked by how many people have either their cropped wedding photo or something like that. They were a bridesmaid or a best man of something. And, we can all kind of up our game when it comes to getting a nice shot, and it's not that expensive, for $100 or $200, you can have have an hour with a photographer and get that image. So that's really important. And then just making sure that everything that you're presenting publicly is furthers your brand. So I think that the first step would be sitting down and figuring out, how do you want to be seen? What do you want to be known for? And making sure that the things that you are doing online, especially in LinkedIn, is furthering that brand.
I love that. Where's that replay button of a professional headshot? Because I think that's one I want to replay that over and over again for any of our friends. Seidl, anything to add on that personal brand on social media online?
Yeah, I know you meant my headshot. That's okay. It's hard. There's a lot better material than trying to deal with me. But so kind of tangential, since we're on LinkedIn Live, give a commercial for LinkedIn. But leveraging LinkedIn, but I'd say even more specifically, Sales Navigator. So if you're in a sales career, so maybe back to Adam, kind of any companies that you're selling to, any specific people that you're selling to, executives, if it's in technology, tag CIOs at all those different companies, or CTOs or CISOs, or analytics, whoever it is that you're selling to. So that way, then as they post, then that'll pop up. And you could then kind of respond and say, oh, that's great. You could kind of retweet or retag or send forward along in LinkedIn. And then over time, the person's going to say, wow, this is amazing. Hey, this person Adam's coming in, they're being thoughtful. And it's kind of part relationship building, but also part branding. And you're kind of being very thoughtful. And sometimes on LinkedIn, it's challenging, right? Because you got this whole massive feed and half the people, things you may not care about, but leveraging Sales Navigator is a really great way to kind of cultivate and nurture that and add to your brand.
That's a great insight. So we got a question from Mike Leese.
All right, Mike, thanks. What do you think about possibly doing operations? I assume sales or company operations, not medical operations. Sorry. I would love to still be CRO, but I think right now I could have more impact in sales ops. Do you think it could hurt me later? Yeah, I'll give an easy answer. I think over time, with all the tools that are out there now, this kind of the notion of you have to be from sales to be CRO, but I think being in operations or revenue operations, I mean the tools that are out there now I think are amazing, and I think it's a fantastic tour duty. You also have sometimes positions are kind of chief of staff, which really means you're a right hand for kind of whatever executive. But I think I'm always supportive of whether it's people going into I did a product marketing stint for a bit. You can go into engineering, you can do operations, you can do finance, but the more well-rounded you are, the better CRO you could be and better business leader.
Jennifer, talk about revenue operations and that role and the impact of that role and the success of not just the CRO, but the revenue engine in the organization.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to tag team a little bit on what Randy said as well. I completely agree. But if you're going to be a CRO and that is your goal, if you don't nail the sales side of it, I've heard a couple of people that I went to a BDR role and then now I'd like to go into marketing, or I would like to go into sales operations. If you don't really nail that sales side, you wouldn't be an appropriate CRO. So I want to couch the fact that you have to build up that solid skill set first. Have 5 years where you are consistently making quota, you're top of the team, you've been recognized for that skill set that you have built, and then focus on the cross-functional skill sets. Because if you don't absolutely love, you can't walk the walk, and if you don't absolutely love sales, that would be my first question is, if you're not super passionate about sales, why are you running away from sales, especially if you don't have that solid skill set built yet? So build that first and then jump into marketing, jump into operations. That cross-functional skill set is really fantastic as a well-rounded career professional. But sales first if you're going to be a CRO.
We're getting some great questions. The next one is from Scott Wilcox.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Struggling as a manager, my team is doing well, hitting the number, but I feel the churn coming. I can't keep up with the quotas coming at me. What are some ways to get my sales team's energy back? A couple thoughts. Number one is, as a manager, feel free to push back. So if you think your team is being slighted, no offense, sometimes quotas just come down from finance without any kind of thoughtfulness and people throw it against the wall and, see what happens. So ultimately as a leader, I'd always say your number one job is always sales calls, but is, making sure your team has a fair goal. And if they have a fair goal, then it's a fair compensation plan. And that cures a lot of other issues and faults. So make sure that happens. And if you can't do anything there, then, certainly with your team, do all the right things that you can do to nurture, to help, to support them, to go on sales calls with them, get management involved in deals. So if they see that, things are tough or the, expectations are tough, it's a good idea to, let them know firsthand. If it's a CFO dictating goals, hey, have the CFO go on sales calls, or, now, especially with Zooms, it's an easy way to, kind of figure it out. So it's kind of managing up to, kind of get the right thing, and then ultimately taking care of your team to support them as much as you can. And I'm sure Jennifer has some other perspectives.
Yeah, Jen, if you could build on that, either unfair or unrealistic quotas, and then kind of getting the team's energy back.
I completely agree with Randy. I think that was a perfect answer. The only thing that I would really add is, would there be an opportunity to maybe add a headcount and adjunct if, for example, there isn't a flexibility in the quota, for example, for the team. But I would absolutely reiterate that, if you can get that quota, if it is not reasonable and it's kind of one of those moonshots, I always like to make sure that around, between 65 and 75% of people are able to make quotas, or they're just too high. And if people really don't feel like there's an opportunity to make money or hit their numbers, people will start looking. So you want it to be fair and achievable, a good stretch, but fair and achievable. And then I would talk to the team. Also, I like to, bring my team into things like that. So I might pick a couple of folks that, I trust and that I could talk to about, what are the key things that you guys are hitting out there, the barriers, right? Is there anything that we can, is there something that we can tweak on the product side? Is there an opportunity to maybe set up a partnership with a different partner that can bring us into things and help us either grow our deal sizes or shrink our sales cycles, those kinds of things. Oftentimes the folks, as long as you're, willing to go and ask, they have some ideas. They might have some ideas that would be able to grow revenue quicker. So those kinds of things are important too.
Great. Let's jump into this comment and question by Jesse.
I've looked at being a head of sales at one point in my career. I'm terrified of some of the founders in technology and expectations on sales leaders being treated like a professional athlete, but sometimes not even having both hands to play with. Should I consider look at roles like this with technical founders? I know Jennifer can speak well to this, and I guess to set it up, I think anytime you're going in, if it's great to have technical founders, but if they've got zero appreciation of sales or throw sales under the bus at the first moment they can, then that would be a bad environment, and it's a hard thing to really try and figure it out early, in the interview process before you take the job, right, Jennifer?
Yeah. So that can be a real challenge, Jesse. So I would say, make sure that you're doing your due diligence on the way in, see how sales is perceived. There are certain things, for me, accountability and autonomy really have to go together. It's very difficult if you're not able to make the decisions to drive your business forward in a healthy manner to be held accountable to, the numbers from the board or from leadership. So that can set up a very stressful situation where you really don't have the autonomy to drive things the way you need to, but you're still accountable for the number. So just those are good questions to ask when you're considering roles: is how is sales viewed? How much autonomy would I have? Things like marketing budgets, sales headcount budgets, those kinds of things. How big do you want to see the team scale within 18 to 24 months, so you can kind of see what are the numbers, what does the pipeline look like, and what am I really getting into? So the due diligence right there would be the most important. And there are situations that are not winnable, so it's easy, it's better to find that out beforehand.
Jennifer, you're talking to a number of private equity firms and VC firms about potential opportunities. Do they get the value of sales and sales management and sales leadership? And do they really understand what it takes to create that kind of scalable business model?
Typically they do. If they're savvy and have been around the block, they absolutely do and are very supportive of sales. And especially in VC is all about growth. So it's how do we get there faster? How do we get to a solid, profitable, exit and build a profitable, solid company? So yes, I would say if they're savvy in business like that and they've been around the block, absolutely they're supportive of sales for sure.
I'm going to give you a chance for final comments. What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to in this post-pandemic era? And then we'll go to Randy.
I'm excited to meet with folks face to face again. I miss going to trade shows every now and then. It's been a nice little break to not be on a plane. I think I have been on a plane for the first time for 18 months for the first time in my career. I'm usually weekly flying. So it's been a nice little, but I do miss breaking bread with people. I don't think that you have to be in person every single meeting, but if I'm closing a big account, it goes a really long way to be able to have those personal conversations, meet people face to face, shake a hand. That's a big deal. And I miss trade shows because it's the opportunity to meet with, 20 customers all within a very short period of time. And it's just a huge time saver for everyone.
Randy, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to say, Jennifer, thanks. Fantastic, authentic. I'm sure you're going to do great wherever you end up. And Nour, as always, thank you so much. Just want to also add on, looks like Eugenio, we might have missed a question and there's probably some others. So if Jennifer or I missed any questions, we're very reachable through probably, LinkedIn. I don't think there's too many Jennifer Haases or Randy Seidls out there. So, certainly feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. And, for this, I definitely appreciate everybody being on. LinkedIn Live has worked out fantastic for us with sales community. Just a reminder, we still have our 30-day free trial going. So that's a no-brainer. You can go learn more, sell more, so you can make more. Great content, great webinars. And Nour, maybe you can talk about our 10X session coming up tomorrow.
It is. So once a month, I, on behalf of the sales community, I host a interactive kind of roundtable via Zoom. You can check it out at salescommunity.com/events. This week, tomorrow, I'm going to talk about a new sandbox engine. So how do we go identify net new sales opportunities, net new markets, net new growth engines? So I believe it has to come above and beyond the core business. So I'm going to show you some examples. We're going to talk about new business models to go to market with that would be very relevant to the revenue engine of any organization. So I hope you'll join us. It is 3:00 Eastern tomorrow, Thursday. And again, you can learn more and register to join us at salescommunity.com/events. A ton of great resources on that site that I hope you'll join us for. So we
also have, just bring up what I'm thinking about it. So next Wednesday, we have Andrew Ettinger, who's CRO of Astronomer. Lots of background, big companies, but a lot recently in the smaller company side of things. So I think that'll be fantastic. And then Tuesday, Tony Gieri and I host Design Your Life session. And that is going to be The Game is Always Changing. And that's Tuesday at 3:00. And again, this Tech Sales Insights that we just had now, we're having it next week with Andrew. Likewise, same time.
On behalf of Randy Seidl, I'm David Nour. Jennifer, thank you for being our guest. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week, same time, Wednesdays at noon Eastern.
Thanks, everybody.